astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start.
2, 1.
First of all, I'm not a professional skeptic. I'm a professional scientist.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaronism, back with another live video for you today. What could possibly be better, actually, than not one, but two Jaronisms live in the same day? If you answered 3, you're correct. And thank you, Neil, for exposing yourself. Obviously, Neil has not the slightest idea what it means to be a scientist. As one of the main things about being a scientist, that you should be a skeptic. Not to say you're not a skeptic. That is when you're pushing religion. So thank you, Neil, for that one. So thank you guys for joining us. A big thank you first to Morgan Ellis and IPS, the dailyplane.com and Horizontal Horizon for your donations on the live stream I did earlier. Very much appreciated. And yes, I've already done this video once today, so that video got stuck, and so here goes round 2. So if you watched earlier, you've already seen this. So if you want to bounce now, no hard feelings. However, if you want to stay around and watch, please enjoy yourself. So good evening to those chatting away in the chat, and to all those others. Welcome to Jaronism's iPhone and Android level app. Can they help prove the flat Earth? So you might be thinking, that's crazy. How could that possibly be true? But you heard me correctly. Could it be that for 2.5 years, that we've all been trying to prove something and trying to find one way or another to definitively know, and the entire time, the answer was in our pockets? Wouldn't that be fitting for a flat Earth community? So we'll find out. That would certainly be crazy. Now, could we be wrong? Absolutely. Definitely could be wrong. But it isn't looking that way, and so I'm going to take you through several steps. But first, while I set the phone up here so that you can watch what I do with the app, let's watch the beginning of the video we're going to be looking at tonight. It is awesome, and we're going to show you here, if I can get this browser put up. And this is the channel that you should check out. His name is Rannick, so definitely subscribe to that channel. And his most recent video is called Flat Earth, Say Goodbye to the Ball. Definitely should have a lot more views. It has been mirrored on many channels, including Globebusters, which, by the way, don't forget to join us tomorrow, noon Pacific, on the Globebusters channel for another fun Sunday of FE discussion. So definitely tune in for that. But let's start by watching just the first opening of this video, and then I'm going to turn on my app and show you exactly what Rannick found that, if you ask me, is the most significant find probably in the 2.5 years. So let's watch. Alright, so what I've got set up here is, let's hope it's all working just perfectly great. Oops, and now it's not. It was. Let's get this set up, sorry about that. Well, okay. 1 second, let me figure out why I'm not sharing my screen here. Interesting. Hold on one second here. Sorry about that. Why am I not getting this thing to show? Yes, only screen. There we go. We're back. Okay. So, if you should be seeing on the screen now, half of the screen is set to the app, and the other half of the screen is set to the camera. So you can see that I am actually looking at the same thing as the screen is showing. So first thing we're going to go to is this app called Surface Level. And when we bring that up, we get this app here, and you'll see that this ball moves basically in regards to where you hold the level. So the interesting thing about this app, and the reason I think you should download this one particularly, is I downloaded about 3 before I found one that had the calibration device. So once you've got it on a level table like this is here, you can go ahead and click that level button or the calibration button, and now as you can see, it is calibrated at level right there. Okay, so if we tilt this up now, let's say we tilt it to about there, you'll see it's no longer level, but I can press the level button, the calibration again, and now it thinks that this is level. And then when I lower it back down to the flat position, you'll see it's no longer registering as flat. So it might seem insignificant, but that's pretty significant, and I'm going to show you why now. So also on this app, or on the iPhone, I'm going to show you, so just kind of keep watching the screen there, that there is another app here that is on here. It's called Sensor Kinetics. Okay, let me actually position this better for you. 1 second, so that you can get the full effect here. And that is the no, not that one. Okay, so we're going to go this one, and we're going to center this a little better for you. And there we go. Okay, so we talked to somebody after the last one, and they had me download this app. Very interesting app, and let me show you why. As we thumb through these pages, you'll see, and this is a free app. Anybody can download it, iPhone, if you have an iPhone. It's called Sensor Kinetics. And you'll see here that there's some numbers constantly propagating here. We've got the accelerometer sensor, you've got your gyroscope sensor, and you've got your magnetometer sensor. We can even go further down. We got a linear acceleration sensor. A little bit further, we've got a gravity sensor. And a little bit further, we've got a cartoon ball. So, what is important about this? Well, let's start at the gravity sensor. What's happening with the gravity sensor right now is it's telling me that the force of gravity is negative 9.76 meters per second squared, and it's pulling in the negative z axis, okay, which is straight down to the floor. This is sitting on the desk in front of me as we speak. So something interesting that we found, and I may have said this incorrectly earlier when I said that the iPhone doesn't know where down is. Okay, well, the iPhone was programmed to know where down is. So what I meant to say, and what I still mean, is that the iPhone does not have forces acting upon it that tell it where down is. Okay, it's not as if gravity is pulling the phone and that's what's telling it where down is. The phone has been programmed by the developers to know which way down is because it was told. So one interesting thing here to kind of realize that, I'm going to tip my phone up on to its lower left side now. And when I do that, we should have the force of 1g, the force of 1g, or 9.8 meters per second squared, should be distributed evenly throughout the phone. But you'll notice here that I'm actually getting a negative 8, and then a negative 3, and a negative 3. And what you'll notice here is that this will never change. So for instance, if I go back to that other app, so we're going to go back to the other one here. Okay, so you'll see there that it's calibrated right now, because if I tip it to the left here, so let's go ahead and calibrate it back home. Okay, so that's flat. Then I'm going to tip it a little bit to the left. Okay, and I'm going to calibrate it right there. So it's off center. I'm calibrating it there. Now it thinks that's center. Now I've laid it back down and it's off center. But if I go back to that other app, which is the Sensor Kinetics, you'll notice that the gravity button here is not changed. Okay, so what that's proving is that the phone never loses its home base, let's say. Okay, so it's been programmed for which way is down. When it's laying flat on the table, it knows that down is underneath it. And it doesn't ever lose that information. Okay, so when I say the phone doesn't know where down is, I mean that the phone does not have forces acting upon it that is telling it where home is. It simply has been programmed to know where home is. Okay? And the interesting thing about the other app is, like I said, the reason I think you should download it is because what it basically does is marks a position as like a new home base and then still operates normally. So what we're going to be looking at here is if somebody were to get on a plane, and it'd even get easier than this possibly, but if you were to get on a plane, and let's say we just got on the plane and we click calibration, so we are back to our regular home base, and the plane takes off, and we fly to, you name it. Let's bring up this little graphic here. If I can find it, there we go. Okay, so if we look at this cartoon ball here, and make sure I have that right thing up. There we go. Okay, so if we look at this ball here, if we were to start our little plane trek at the top, and we are going to travel just a little bit, let's just say we go to the, say, 2 o'clock position here, and then we land. Well, what would happen to our gravity meter here? Because we set the home base when we were on the plane on the ground back at 12 o'clock, and we've now changed our position relative to the Earth. So the question becomes, should the level app tell me that it's still level, or should it change because we've changed our orientation with the globe? Now, there's some interesting questions that will come up because of this, because if people think it should change, well then wouldn't it also change due to the spin of the Earth? Meaning now, rather than place ourselves in an airplane, now instead pretend that you are just, put yourself there in California, in North America there, and picture the globe is spinning. And as it gets to, wherever California would be, probably about 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock there, haven't you also changed your position, relative to the Earth? That you should see a change in the level app. Well, this is the question, and we're going to watch the video right now that's going to show that pretty much positively that the iPhone does not have forces on it, or the Android, whatever app you're using, does not have any forces on it telling it which way down is. Okay, it just simply knows which way down is because it's been programmed that way. So if that's true, when we tilt the app to the side and we recalibrate it, well, then when we lay it down, it no longer thinks that down is level. It now thinks that down is off-centered. So that's what we're going to watch this video for. And there's a couple interesting points here. We want to watch first what the mechanism is that's being used inside that. Sorry about my dog. He's going crazy. And so let's get past this part here all the way to the maker of this video. And there we go. So he asks first the question, have you ever asked yourself how the phone works, how the gyroscope works in your cell phone?
Today's video we're going to be looking at the MPU 6050 6 degrees of freedom breakout board, which features a 3-axis accelerometer and a 3-axis gyroscope. So I'm going to be walking you through the entire implementation of this particular integrated circuit. I'm going to be showing you exactly which registers I'm pulling the data from, exactly how to wire and write the software to be able to read the values, what to do with the values, what you can possibly modify in the program to kind of get something relevant more than just the pure raw data of the accelerometer and the gyroscope. And as a very quick demonstration of the data that's currently being sent back to the Arduino serial port, you can look on your screen right now, and as you can see, you have the gyro readings in the degrees as well as the accelerometer readings in G's. So let's take a look first of all at the gyroscope. It is the speed at which you rotate above a certain axis.
So real quick, just to point out something for you, if we go to our browser here, and we're going to transition over there, and hopefully I can get that up. Okay, so you'll see here we found the researchers developed pinhead-sized gyroscope for smartphones and medical devices. This was way back in 2010, and it says earlier this year the iPhone 4 became the first smartphone to boast a built-in gyroscope in addition to an accelerometer, proximity sensor, and ambient light sensor. And basically what we've learned is that in each iPhone and also Android device is a 3-axis accelerometer and a 3-axis gyroscope. So the gyro is reading degrees, the accelerometer is measuring in G's. On the z-axis we are getting a G rate. Okay, so your phone can recognize yaw, pitch, and roll, something a lot of people didn't recognize, and we can go back and look at the app that shows that in a few minutes. So when your phone sits on the desk, it is the accelerometer is reading negative 9.8 meters per second squared. If you were to drop your phone as it falls towards the ground, it would read 0 meters per second squared. So let's continue on, and I'll drop the link to this in the description, so you can read this article if you'd like right after the video is done. Let's continue.
Imagine my z-axis is going straight into the table. So if you look at your screen right now, the z is about 0.4 degrees or so. So that's the error that we're getting. As soon as I start rotating the board, you see that number decrease because I'm going in a clockwise direction. If I go counterclockwise, that number is going to go up until I release the board. As far as the accelerometer goes, this is currently reading the g-force that is being exercised by Earth. So once again, this is in the z-axis. You have 1g going down. If I tilt the module along the y-axis, you can see this force is being spread evenly at 45 degrees on the y and the z axes.
So the question ultimately becomes here is whether or not the phone recognizes the force of gravity on its own, or has it been told which way gravity is? That's the big question. And I think that the answer is definitive, and that's what we're going to look at here. Again, I recommend this video. Check out the whole thing. This here is going through a conversation between one of the app developers and somebody trying to use the program, and they're talking about the problem with the z-axis. And when you get to the part, and did I miss it? Where they're going through this conversation, you get to an interesting answer here, and this is where it is. I'll pause that right there. And the answer is, and he says, maybe you're confusing the accelerometer with the gyroscope. A gyroscope can track rotations, while the accelerometer only reports the result of forces acting on the phone, usually fast motions, movements, shaking, hitting, etc. And then the response is, well, the problem I'm facing right now is that it seems that the gyro doesn't work with Android devices, and input.gyro enabled seems to always be false. I tried to change the gravity with physics.gravity equals vector 3001, but it seems that the accelerometer works with real gravity, not the scene gravity. I'll be appreciated if you'd some other idea to make it work. And here comes kind of the ultimate omission, or the ultimate admission. Response is, yes, the accelerometer axes are fixed, and physics.gravity isn't taken into account. Okay, so physics.gravity is not taken into account. It's not looking at the gravity that supposedly exists. It has been entered into the phone, and that's why when we start off with the phone sitting stationary on my desk, it is showing negative 9.8 meters per second squared. So for the practical purpose of finding the acceleration of objects with respect to the Earth, such as for the use in an inertial navigation system, a knowledge of local gravity is required, and this can be obtained either by calibrating the device at rest or from a known model of gravity at the approximate current position. Okay, and we got one more little thing coming up here. So you have to be on a level plane to calibrate the device, and again, in the developers, when they put the phone out, they tell the phone exactly where down is, and then we can adjust that with a particular app like the one I have, where you're telling it to choose a new center point, but it, like we said, keeps its old point, so it's never losing technically exactly where the ground is, or where gravity is pulling it, so-called. But again, there is no force of gravity that is causing the phone to register that. It has been entered into the phone, and again, we'll go back and look at that app one more time before we shut it down. But just think of a puff of smoke or whatever you want that starts rising. Gravity is not affecting that smoke. It's not pulling it down. And in the same way, you have to understand that there's no force of gravity that's affecting my cell phone. So I hold the iPhone in the air, there is no force of gravity pulling it down. And we know that because if I sit it on the desk, okay, it tells us that it's negative 9.8 meters per second squared. That's been entered in by the manufacturer to the point where if I drop the phone, it will approach 0 meters per second squared. But that has been entered already. You know, if you ask me, it should be 0 when you set it on the desk. And as I drop it, well, then the force of gravity might be working on it. But the force of gravity has already been put in. And let's continue on here. So he says here, since it detects deviation from free fall, its reading can sometimes be used to infer the properties of local gravity if we utilize other knowledge of the situation that we may have. Imagine that you're in a little box and you have the accelerometer with you, and all we know is that the reading that it's returning. And based on that knowledge alone, we could never determine the direction of or strength of gravity. So picture a box in free fall. You're inside that box with the accelerometer in your hand, and you just, like the ISS astronauts, are just falling. You're free falling. So you can't tell, based if you are inside that box, which direction you're falling or anything. You wouldn't be able to determine that, and neither would the phone. Now consider injecting selected other knowledge, and particularly knowledge that relates to our deviation from free fall to the local gravity vector. And when you do that, if we are in free fall, the accelerometer reads 0 and we can't infer anything about the direction or strength of gravity. The only way we can learn anything is to open a window and look outside, taking note of passing scenery and which way we're falling. The accelerometer would be no help at all. The basic idea of extra knowledge is fundamental to inferring the gravity vector from the output. I'm going to turn this up. Hopefully you can hear it's a little quiet. This is an interesting conversation on this video starting right about here.
We should have been talking about gyroscopes all along.
Well, the thing the accelerometer picks up that's causing the issue is gravity. And so you come up with an accelerometer that's giving you one bit of data, and you've sort of got two unknowns. You've got one, which way is the gravity vector pointing, and two, which way is this thing accelerating. Now fundamentally we can make some assumptions that when you're starting out of thrust, this thing isn't moving. And then you can say, okay, gravity's down. We measure a little bit of acceleration incrementally. Alright, we know we move this way a little bit, so we can assume that gravity's pointing down this way. Now we go a little bit farther. Alright, we know we moved it a little bit farther, gravity's now this way. But you've got a little bit of tolerance on each of those measurements, and so as you go along, your gravity vector is getting less and less accurate over time, and so your readings are getting less and less accurate. What the gyro does is it just looks at angular rate. So sitting here, you're getting a 0. As soon as you move, you don't have to worry about the gravity vector. All you see is that you've changed an angle, and that gives you a lot more accuracy. Another problem with the accelerometer is that if it's positioned here, and we make a motion, we know the distance between the accelerometer and the pivot point approximately. And so we can tell how far our angle went. If we are doing something where the device is positioned like this and we're thrusting, now the distance is changing, and our angular measurement is becoming much more complicated. We have to know how far we thrust, as well as how much force has been applied. Where with the gyro, it doesn't really matter where the gyro is in the device. Tilt is tilt, and it gives us a result.
So it starts out with information that, I mean, the accelerometer starts out with information that we don't end up using except as a starting point to start calculating from.
Yeah, it's something we just need to subtract out fundamentally.
Right.
And it creates an...
Get to the goddamn...
Sorry about that. And so we think of the accelerometer as measuring gravity, but the gyroscope does a better job of telling us the angle change. So over time, the acceleration will, or the accelerometer, will get less and less accurate. And the gyro, on the other hand, it knows whether you've changed the phone orientation and can always measure that accurately. And so our phones have been set with a factory default of which way gravity is, but we have a calibrate button, and we can change that locally. And again, yes, the phone will remember where down is if you turn the phone off or lose your battery, whatever happens there, that when you turn it back on, it will go back to the default gravity. However, if you're flying in a plane and you set the app to a new calibration and you fly, like we showed earlier, to the 3 o'clock position on the globe or wherever, any change, you should see a change in the level of that app. But I don't think you will. And the question becomes, is this the answer that many people have been looking for, the definitive answer one way or the other? Let's continue.
What's the point, man?
There's no reason. Here's my point, dude. There's no fucking reason why these.
Yeah, Walter, what's your point?
Huh?
Walter, what is the point?
You push that button. Everything we've accomplished for the past 500 years will be finished. Our technology, our way of life, our entire history. We'll have to start all over again. For God's sakes, don't do it, Snake!
My name's Pliskin.
So the point becomes that this doesn't know where down is, and down must be defined either by the local calibration button or by the manufacturer or the developer. The basic idea of extra knowledge is fundamental to inferring the gravity vector from the output of an accelerometer. A knowledge of local gravity is required. So we've needed to tell the phone which way gravity is, and this extra knowledge can come in the form of a factory default, which can be defined manually also if we use a calibration button. Again, the phone will remember its main base. So how useful is this? Well, if we put ourselves on a plane and you're banking without extra knowledge, such as looking out the window, you wouldn't know that you're banking. Okay, and I calibrate this bubble level app to the floor of the plane as being down. So remember, we're banking in the plane and we calibrate that. And when I get back to the ground, the level would be off because you calibrated it during a bank. Correct? So this is the app we're looking at here. We're in a bank turn. We land the plane and it's now off level. How can this be? Without extra knowledge of where down is, I set down to the floor of the banking airplane. And when you do that, when you land, down on the ground is not the same. And so, if you don't see it yet or you don't see how important it is, like I said, I find it to be the biggest find so far. I think it's going to open up a lot. So if you calibrate down where I am here, and you travel to here, would we see a difference in the level of the app? That is the question, and I think the answer will shock the world, because your level should be off, but the level will in fact be identical. Again, if you're standing at the beach in California, you're at sea level, and if you're standing at the beach in Australia, you're sea level. And the question becomes, well, is there this huge, hump of water in between you? Or in fact, are both places actually level and you never are changing your orientation in regards to the Earth? That's the big question. Is anybody upside down? Is Australia down under? Those are the questions we're looking. So we look forward to answers. We look forward to videos explaining how somebody is going to explain how exactly this works, because it's going to be somebody who's going to have to show us that the phone somehow is using some sort of force to figure out which way gravity is, and that just simply isn't the case. So I'm going to turn back on this app one more time so you can see what I'm doing here, and let's get it rolling. Alright, so this is the, whoops, you're not seeing that, are you? Let me transition this 1 second. We're just going to look at the sensor kinetics one more time, if I can get this thing to work. Why does it not go on? There it is. Alright, so we're going to go back to the sensor kinetics and look at this one more time. There's some very interesting numbers on here. If you have an iPhone, definitely download this and take a look. I think there's so much more information here than any of us ever thought. We're out trying to find ring laser gyros, and pretty much 90% of people have a gyro in their pocket, which I did not know. Again, so we're looking first at the accelerometer sensor here at the top. Here's some crazy stuff you can do. Check this out. So you can actually bring up a graph here, okay, and you can start a recording. So I'm going to start recording this, and as I want, I can tilt and jive this phone in different directions and create a graph that's keeping track of my exact changes in the yaw, pitch, roll axes. Then you can hit stop, and you've got yourself this chart that you can go through. You can zoom in and see exactly what's going on. Imagine somebody taking a plane trip, or something I'm going to do this evening as soon as I'm off with this. I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to start a chart, and I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to start and just let it stay there, because we should see a deviation. I am spinning on the Earth. I should change my relative level, my position on the Earth. Will it change? Well, I think that deep down inside, everyone should see that there's a fundamental issue here. And again, you know me, that fundamental issue is you cannot live on a ball. It's not possible. Okay, and we've been fooled in the worst way. And it's time that we call it out. And I know a lot of people think it's not true. And if you've done the research and looked into it, it becomes obvious that something is terribly wrong with the theoretical science. I love applied science, but the theoretical science, the stuff that we can't prove, and if you think that you can prove how far the sun is and you think you can prove how far the stars are, well, I ask you to look into it. Again, as I mentioned last show as well, you just need to take a look, number one, at the idea of relativity, and the idea that if it's a relativistic universe as we have been taught in the way that science dictates, well, then there is no absolute motion. And so if there's no absolute motion, then the question of what orbits what, does the Earth orbit the sun or does the sun orbit the Earth, is not a valid scientific question. It cannot be asked, because there is no scientific answer for it. The answer has to be it's relative. So if you're standing on the sun, the Earth will look to orbit the sun. And if you're standing on the Earth, the sun looks to orbit the Earth. And nobody can say which one is actually happening. Yet, go to any college classroom, any junior high, any middle school, any scientist, and ask them whether or not the Earth orbits the sun or the sun orbits the Earth, and they'll laugh you out of the building and tell you, of course, we all know that the Earth orbits the sun, which is an impossible scientific statement if relativity is true. So when you really start putting everything together, you look at some of these quotes from Einstein and Hawking, and these people who have no problem admitting, George Ellis, Julian Barber, they have no problem admitting that there is no optical test that proves whether the Earth moves or doesn't. And there is no optical test that proves whether the Earth spins or doesn't. These things cannot be measured. They've never been measured. And so what you've got here is a situation where we're told science is one thing and that they've found one thing or another. And if that's the case, well, then the evidence should be everywhere. But what do we find instead of evidence? We find your top mainstream physicists and scientists admitting it without problem. George Ellis admits it wholeheartedly. He says something that I think everyone should read, and that is his quote where he says that a lot of the models that we go with are decided on philosophically, and a lot of cosmology tries to hide that. And that's something he thinks should change. People should recognize that the models that science has agreed upon are not the only models that observations dictate. Again, the Earth could be at the center of the universe, and all the observations would remain the exact same. In fact, you don't need dark matter, you don't need dark energy. They can go out the window, so you can understand the universe that you live in again, and all you have to do is place the Earth at the center. But because science knows what that dictates, that it follows with the question of the who, the why are we here, who put us in the middle, what makes us special, and science refuses to let that question enter the consciousness of humanity. So instead, they've robbed you of your true identity, of the true place that you live. And again, it doesn't mean that we are in the middle or that we are the center of the universe. But the fact that science, which bases everything off observations, is able to dismiss something that observations tell us could possibly be true, and they just flush it away because they want to be modest, well, modesty is not pretending that you've figured out the age of the Earth, that you've figured out the age of the universe, all within the tiny little 50-year span that you've been alive out of the 4.54 billion years of the Earth's history. That's not modesty. That is telling people that you know everything. You know what the moon is, you know what the sun is, you know how far the planets are, you travel in space, you do all these fantastic things. You know about evolution. It's backed by pure hardcore science. Is that really the case? That's what I ask you to do, is to research these things, look into them, because they're not what you've been told, and they're not what we've been taught. And that's a big problem. Again, applied science is different than theoretical science. And if you go outside, if it's nighttime for you, it will be for me here in about 15-20 minutes. Take a look at the stars and recognize that you're told that the nearest star, other than the sun, is 25 trillion miles away. That is a number we can't even fathom. 25 trillion. Okay, 25 trillion. Do you know how many years 1 trillion seconds would be? Just 1 trillion seconds. Would it be 3 years? 33 years? No, it's 33,000 years is 1 trillion seconds. Yet the closest star in the sky to you is 25 trillion miles. And yet we see a pinprick in the sky. When I shot my 4-mile laser across the ocean, in just 4 miles, that beam went from being a pinprick to a 10-foot diameter circle. So I guess the beam of light that comes from stars must not grow at all. Must get here, and it's just that same pinprick after traveling 25 trillion miles, or many light years. What is that, 4 light years away? You need to look into it, check it out, and get this app. Again, you can take a look here and play with the gravity sensor. Again, we can just know that something's wrong with the gravity sensor. If I tilt my phone up like this, you'll see the numbers I'm getting now are negative 7.4 meters per second squared at the z-axis, negative 5.5 meters per second squared at the y-axis, and negative 3 meters per second squared in the x-axis, which is incorrect because the phone is still sitting right here on my desk. It's just leaning on one side. The g-forces should be still at the 9.8 redistributed, but they are redistributed now and basically have much more pull. So this is definitely something to check out. Get yourself that app that I showed you there. You can change your refresh rate, and you can play with this magnetometer. I didn't know that I thought the iPhone was completely electronic when it comes to a compass, but actually it is measuring your Teslas, your pull of the And you can actually change in your settings for the iPhone, something else I didn't know, you can change it to true magnetic north or true north. That's very interesting. I made a mistake myself on that one, thinking that my phone was way off, and it's actually because it had already figured out the declination for me. So, again, the name of this other app is Surface Level if you have an iPhone. I'm not sure which one it's called if you have an Android. I think some people posted it in the chat. And if I can get one of those, I will put it in the description. Again, play with this, ask questions, look into what you're taught, and question everything. There's no reason you can't question science. In fact, it is probably the number one duty of a scientist is to be skeptical of every claim. Yet instead, we get Neil deGrasse that says something like this.
First of all,
Whoa, I just blew my eardrums out. That was nice. Let's listen to Neil.
first of all, I'm not a professional skeptic. I'm a professional scientist.
Well, you should be a professional skeptic, Neil. Hate to tell you. But that should be number one thing on your job description. And it's unfortunate it's not. Again, the guy's name who made the video that we were checking out, his name is Rannick. Highly recommend you watch the whole thing. And again, ask questions. Be kind to each other. Don't lie to each other. And open your mind, because there is truth inside. It's not going to be found anywhere else. So it's time we end the lies. End them. It's been long enough. 500 years. Your grandparents, my grandparents, our great-grandparents were lied to. We can just be another lied to group of slaves, or we can end it now and make the world a better place. I don't know about you, but I'm all for truth. Doesn't matter if it's a ball, doesn't matter if it's flat. I just want to know the truth. And at this point, the cartoon ball doesn't look like a truth anymore. Till next time, guys. Peace! Well, okay. 1 second, let me figure out why I'm not sharing my screen here. Interesting. Hold on 1 second here. Sorry about that. Why am I not getting this thing to show? Yes, only screen. There we go. We're back. Okay. So, if you should be seeing on the screen now, half of the screen is set to the app, and the other half of the screen is set to the camera. So you can see that I am actually looking at the same thing as the screen is showing. So first thing we're going to go to is this app called Surface Level. And when we bring that up, we get this app here, and you'll see that this ball moves basically in regards to where you hold the level. So the interesting thing about this app, and the reason I think you should download this one particularly, is I downloaded about 3 before I found one that had the calibration device. So once you've got it on a level table like this is here, you can go ahead and click that level button or the calibration button, and now as you can see, it is calibrated at level right there. Okay, so if we tilt this, what Rannick found, that, if you ask me, is the most significant find probably in the 2.5 years. So let's watch. Alright, so what I've got set up here is, let's hope it's all working just perfectly great. Oops, and now it's not. It was. Let's get this set up, sorry about that.
astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 2, 1.
First of all, I'm not a professional skeptic. I'm a professional scientist.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jeranism, back with another live video for you today. What could possibly be better, actually, than not one, but two Jeranisms live in the same day? If you answered 3, you're correct. And thank you, Neil, for exposing yourself. Obviously, Neil has not the slightest idea what it means to be a scientist. As one of the main things about being a scientist, that you should be a skeptic. Not to say you're not a skeptic. That is when you're pushing religion. So thank you, Neil, for that one. So thank you guys for joining us. A big thank you first to Morgan Ellis and IPS, the dailyplane.com and Horizontal Horizon for your donations on the live stream I did earlier. Very much appreciated. And yes, I've already done this video once today, so that video got stuck, and so here goes round 2. So if you watched earlier, you've already seen this. So if you want to bounce now, no hard feelings. However, if you want to stay around and watch, please enjoy yourself. So good evening to those chatting away in the chat, and to all those others, welcome to Jeranism's iPhone and Android level app. Can they help prove the flat Earth? So you might be thinking, that's crazy. How could that possibly be true? But you heard me correctly. Could it be that for 2.5 years, that we've all been trying to prove something and trying to find one way or another to definitively know, and the entire time, the answer was in our pockets? Wouldn't that be fitting for a flat Earth community? So we'll find out. That would certainly be crazy. Now, could we be wrong? Absolutely. Definitely could be wrong. But it isn't looking that way, and so I'm going to take you through several steps. But first, while I set the phone up here so that you can watch what I do with the app, let's watch the beginning of the video we're going to be looking at tonight. It is awesome, and we're going to show you here, if I can get this browser put up. And this is the channel that you should check out. His name is Rannick, so definitely subscribe to that channel. And his most recent video is called Flat Earth, Say Goodbye to the Ball. Definitely should have a lot more views. It has been mirrored on many channels, including Globebusters, which, by the way, don't forget to join us tomorrow, noon Pacific, on the Globebusters channel for another fun Sunday of FE discussion. So definitely tune in for that. But let's start by watching just the first opening of this video, and then I'm going to turn on my app and show you exactly